June 3rd, 1844. Eldey Island, Iceland. 3 fishermen land on a barren volcanic rock jutting from the North Atlantic. They're searching for the last great auks on Earth, flightless seabirds that once numbered in the millions. They find 2, a breeding pair, incubating an egg. Within 10 minutes, both birds are dead, strangled. The egg is smashed underfoot. The fishermen weren't defending themselves. They weren't starving. They were being paid by a museum collector who wanted the last specimens before they disappeared. They knew these were the last great auks. They killed them anyway, for money. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't collateral damage. This was deliberate extinction. And it happened 4 more times in recorded history. What you're about to see are the final photographs, and in some cases, the final moments, of 5 species that humans didn't accidentally drive extinct. We hunted them, deliberately, systematically, until every single one was dead. And in a grotesque twist, we documented it. We photographed the last individuals. We filmed them dying. We preserved their bodies in museums. These aren't memorials. They're crime scene photos. And we're the criminals. Segment 1. The Great Auk, 1844. Killed for museum specimens. The Great Auk was the original penguin, standing 3 feet tall, flightless, with a tuxedo pattern of black and white feathers. They were the birds penguins were later named after. For millions of years, they thrived across the North Atlantic. Iceland, Greenland, Canada, Scotland, Scandinavia, colonies numbering in the hundreds of thousands. They were also incredibly easy to kill. Flightless birds on isolated islands have no fear of predators. When humans arrived, great auks didn't run, they waddled toward people. Curious. European sailors discovered this in the 1500s. A single crew could club hundreds of great auks to death in an hour. They were herded onto ships
like livestock, killed for meat, fat, feathers, and fishing bait. By 1700s, great auk populations were collapsing. By early 1800s, they were rare enough to become valuable. That's when the museum collectors arrived. As great auks became scarce, their eggs and skins became prizes. Museums across Europe competed to acquire specimens. The rarer they became, the more valuable they were. This created a perverse incentive. The closer to extinction, the higher the price. By 1844, ornithologists believed only 1 breeding colony remained, on Eldey Island, a volcanic rock off Iceland's coast. Steep cliffs, dangerous seas, nearly inaccessible. That's where 3 Icelandic fishermen, Jon Brandsson, Sigurður Ísleifsson, and Ketil Ketilsson, were hired by a merchant named Carl Simpson. He'd been commissioned by a museum collector. The instructions were clear. Bring back great auk specimens, dead or alive, preferably dead, easier to preserve. June 3rd, 1844. The fishermen land on Eldey during calm seas, a rare opportunity. They find 2 great auks, a male and female, sitting on an egg. Brandsson and Ísleifsson each grab a bird. The auks struggle, but can't escape. The men strangle them. Ketilsson spots the egg. He kicks it. It rolls across the rocks and shatters. Why destroy the egg? Accounts differ. Some say it was cracked already. Others say Ketilsson didn't want to carry a fragile egg back to the boat. Either way, that egg likely contained the last great auk chick that would ever develop. The 2 dead adults were sold to Simpson for £9 sterling, roughly $1,000 today. He sold them to a Danish merchant, who sold them to a museum. Their skins still exist, mounted in museums in Copenhagen and Brussels. No photographs exist of living great auks. Photography was too primitive in 1844.
but we have detailed illustrations from naturalists who saw them alive. We have descriptions of their calls, a low croaking sound. And we have the testimony of the 3 fishermen who killed the last ones. Here's what haunts me. They knew. Museum collectors had been announcing for years that great auks were nearly extinct. Newspapers covered it. The fishermen knew they were likely killing the last breeding pair. They chose money over existence. And when the last great auk died, nobody was prosecuted. Nobody was punished. The fishermen were paid. The collectors got their specimens. Extinction as a business transaction. Segment 2. The passenger pigeon, 1914. Killed for commercial hunting. From billions to zero in 100 years. That's the passenger pigeon. In the early 1800s, passenger pigeons were the most abundant bird species in North America, possibly the most abundant bird species in human history. Estimates range from 3 to 5 billion individuals. Flocks so large they darkened the sky for 3 days straight. The sound of their wings described as thunder, branches breaking under their weight when they roosted. John James Audubon wrote in 1813, "The air was literally filled with pigeons. The light of noonday was obscured as by an eclipse. They were also delicious." Passenger pigeon meat was cheap, abundant, and easy to acquire. All you had to do was wait for a flock to roost, then knock them out of trees with sticks. But commercial hunting took it to another level. In the mid-1800s, the railroad expanded across America. Suddenly, you could ship tons of pigeon meat from rural areas to cities like New York and Chicago. Passenger pigeons became an industry. Professional hunters used nets, guns, and even dynamite to kill thousands in a single day. One hunter in Michigan reported killing 150,000 pigeons in 1 month. Pigeons were shipped in barrels, sold for pennies, fed to pigs when markets were oversaturated. By 1880, flocks were noticeably smaller. By 1890, they were rare. By 1900, the last wild passenger pigeon was shot. A few dozen remained in captivity. This is Martha, born in the Cincinnati Zoo around 1885, named after Martha Washington. By 1910, she was the last passenger pigeon on Earth. Her mate, George, had died in 1910. For 4 years, Martha lived alone. Zookeepers desperately tried to find her a mate. Rewards were offered for any wild passenger pigeons. None were found. This photograph was taken the morning of September 1st, 1914. Martha is perched in her cage, 29 years old, ancient for a pigeon. She moves slowly. Her feathers are dull. By 1 p.m. that same day, Martha climbed to a low perch, trembled, and fell, dead. Zookeepers immediately froze her body in a 300-pound block of ice and shipped her to the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. She was dissected, studied, stuffed, and mounted. You can see her today. Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History, Hall of Birds, display case. The last passenger pigeon, frozen mid-step, glass eyes staring. Here's what we learned too late. Passenger pigeons required massive flocks to survive. They didn't breed well in small groups. They needed the stimulation, the competition, the sheer density of millions of birds. When we reduced their population to thousands, they couldn't recover. When we reduced them to hundreds, breeding stopped entirely. By the time we tried to save them, it was already over. Martha died alone, the last of 5 billion. And we didn't kill her with hunting. We killed her species decades earlier. She just took longer to die. Segment 3. The thylacine, 1936, killed for bounty money. This is Benjamin. At least, that's what we call him. He might have been female. Nobody bothered to check. Benjamin was a thylacine, commonly called the Tasmanian tiger, though it wasn't a tiger or even a cat. It was a marsupial, a carnivorous kangaroo with stripes. This footage was filmed at Hobart Zoo, Tasmania, in 1933. You're watching Benjamin pace his concrete enclosure, yawn, revealing a jaw that opens 120 degrees, stand on his hind legs like a kangaroo. Every movement you see here is now extinct. Thylacines once lived across Australia and New Guinea. By the time Europeans arrived in 1790, they existed only in Tasmania, and settlers hated them. Thylacines were blamed for killing sheep.
Evidence was circumstantial. Most livestock deaths were caused by feral dogs, but thylacines were easier to scapegoat. In 1830, the Van Diemen's Land Company introduced a bounty system, £1 per dead thylacine. In 1888, the Tasmanian government made it official, £1 for adults, 10 shillings for juveniles. Over 60 years, bounties were paid on over 2,100 thylacines. Hunters used dogs to chase them into caves, then shot them. Trappers used leg-hold snares. Some were poisoned. By 1910, wild thylacines were nearly gone. By 1920, sightings were rare. By 1930, they were extinct in the wild. Benjamin was captured in 1933, possibly the last wild thylacine ever caught. Sold to Hobart Zoo for a few pounds. He lived in a concrete enclosure with a small sleeping den. He was fed wallaby meat. He was filmed occasionally. September 7th, 1936, a cold night. Below, Freezing. Zookeepers locked Benjamin out of his sleeping shelter. Why? Negligence. Forgetfulness. Nobody knows for certain. Benjamin spent the night on concrete, exposed to freezing wind. By morning, he was dead. Hypothermia. The last thylacine on Earth died because somebody forgot to let him inside. There was no outcry, no national mourning. A small notice in the local newspaper. Tasmanian tiger dies at zoo. It wasn't until 1986, 50 years later, that Tasmania declared the thylacine officially extinct. What haunts me about this footage, Benjamin looks at the camera multiple times, direct eye contact. He's curious, he's bored, he's pacing because there's nothing else to do in a concrete box. He doesn't know he's the last one. He doesn't know his species is about to vanish, but we knew. Zoologists knew by 1930 that thylacines were critically endangered. The Tasmanian government knew. The zoo knew, and they let him die from neglect anyway. Segment 4. The Caribbean monk seal, 1952. Killed by fishermen. This photograph shows a Caribbean monk seal basking on a beach in the Caribbean Sea. The year is 1952. That night, fishermen returned to this beach and killed every seal they found. Caribbean monk seals were the only seals native to the Caribbean Sea and Gulf of Mexico. Christopher Columbus wrote about them in 1494. He described vast numbers, so many seals they impeded ship navigation. Spanish sailors called them sea wolves. They were hunted for oil, meat, and skins, but they were also just killed. Seals competed with fishermen for fish. They damaged nets. They ate catches. So fishermen systematically exterminated them. By the early 1900s, Caribbean monk seals were rare. By 1950, only a few colonies remained. This 1952 photograph was taken by a researcher documenting one of the last known colonies, Serranía Bank, a remote reef between Jamaica and Nicaragua. The photograph shows seals resting peacefully, unaware they're being watched. That night, possibly the same night this photo was taken, local fishermen arrived. They shot every seal on the beach. Why? Seals ate fish. Fish were the fishermen's livelihood. In their view, they were protecting their income. The last confirmed sighting of a Caribbean monk seal was 1952.
The same year, this photograph was taken. Here's what differentiates this extinction. No museums wanted specimens. No collectors paid bounties. No governments incentivized killing them. They were killed out of pure economic pragmatism. Seals competed with humans. Humans won. The Caribbean monk seal wasn't valuable enough to save and wasn't worthless enough to ignore. They were just in the way. And so they were erased. Quietly, methodically, without fanfare. Segment 5. The Barbary lion, 1942. Killed for trophies. The Barbary lion was the largest lion subspecies ever recorded. Males weighed over 600 pounds, with massive dark manes extending down their backs and bellies. They were the lions of Roman gladiatorial games, the lions in North African royal menageries, the lions Hannibal possibly used in his armies. For thousands of years, they ruled the Atlas Mountains of Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya. By the early 1900s, they were rare. By 1940, they were nearly extinct. This photograph, grainy, taken from a helicopter, shows the last confirmed wild Barbary lion. Morocco, 1942. The photo was taken by French colonial hunters who had been tracking this lion for weeks. They'd heard reports from Berber shepherds, a massive male lion, alone, roaming the high Atlas Mountains. The hunters chartered a military helicopter, rare and expensive in 1942. They flew over the mountains until they spotted him. This photograph is the proof of their find. Hours later, they landed, tracked the lion on foot, and shot him. Why? Trophy hunting. By 1942, Barbary lions were so rare that killing one was the ultimate hunting prize. Proof of skill, proof of wealth, proof of access. The lion was skinned. His skull and mane were preserved. The body was left for scavengers. That skin and skull are now in a private collection. The hunter's name is lost to history. Some claim Barbary lions survive in captivity, descendants of Moroccan royal menageries. Genetic testing suggests some zoo lions carry Barbary DNA, but the wild, free-roaming Barbary lion, the terror of the Atlas Mountains, died in 1942, killed for a photograph and a trophy. What makes this especially grotesque? The hunters knew. They knew this might be the last wild Barbary lion. That knowledge made killing him more desirable, not less. Rarity increased value. The closer to extinction, the greater the trophy. 5 species, 5 deliberate extinctions. The great auk, killed for museum collections. The last pair strangled while incubating an egg. The passenger pigeon, killed for commercial meat markets, from 5 billion to 0 in 100 years. The thylacine, killed for bounty money. The last one died of neglect in a zoo. The Caribbean monk seal, killed by fishermen who saw them as competition, quietly erased. The Barbary lion, killed for trophy hunting. The rarer they became, the more valuable. None of these extinctions were accidents. None were unavoidable. None were natural. We chose profit over existence. We chose trophies over life. We chose convenience over preservation. And then we photographed the evidence. These images aren't memorials, they're confessions. But here's the terrifying part. We're still doing this. Right now, northern white rhinos are being poached for horns worth more than gold. Right now, vaquitas are drowning in gill nets set for another species. Right now, elephants are being killed for ivory, tigers for bones, pangolins for scales. The methods have changed, the justifications have changed, but the result is the same: deliberate extinction driven by human demand. The difference between 1844 and 2025 is that now we know better. We know what extinction looks like. We've documented it. We've studied it.
We've mourned it, and we're doing it anyway. These 5 photographs are warnings from the past to the present. Future generations will look back at us the same way we look at those Icelandic fishermen who strangled the last great ox, with disgust, with incomprehension, with the question, how could they? The answer is the same then as now. We could because we chose to. The only question is, will we choose differently this time? If this video changed your perspective, subscribe. Next week, animals that died alone as the last of their species. The Extinction Archive isn't just about the past, it's about preventing the future.